Thanks, Dent, and thank you everyone for again for joining the call. I think everyone is very keen to find out how we propose to return to a national competition, and hopefully we can answer a lot of your questions tonight. As Dent said, if you could leave your questions in the chat, what I'd like to do is to go through our proposal and our presentation in full. And then once we get to the end, then we can start taking questions, and I'm sure there will be many, but we'd like to tell the whole story before we start to dive into some more, perhaps, of the detail that you want to hear. So joining me tonight again is Harry. I think all of you know Harry, Director of Junior Development, and he and I together will talk about the details of the return of the proposal. And Den as well, if you could give any questions to Den, then he'll help ask those questions to myself and Harry later. So let's move on with with what we're going to talk about. So first of all, what I want to do is give you an idea of where we are, what's been happening over the last few months, what have we been learning from these ratings-based events, and where have they been, and what are the opportunities, and what are the challenges, and the questions that you've been asking yourselves to try and figure out what you should do at this time. Then we're going to talk about the proposal for how we will transition back to a points-based junior ranking system, and it will be a phased approach. And we'll describe exactly how we're intending to do that, and hopefully we can do it in a fair and balanced way. We'll also want to talk a little bit about the operational protocols that we think will need to be in place when we go through that transition and beyond. And then finally, we'll ask some questions. So hopefully we will manage to answer every question you have. So first of all, this is where we are. I think we ended up last time when we spoke with you with a picture like this, saying this is how we think that it's going to progress through the coronavirus pandemic. So the last time we spoke, I think we were in the first stages where we were having clubs. Some clubs were closed, some were open. In October, we introduced an interim junior framework that was based on a rating system. So we decided to transfer the rankings to a ratings-based. We had any organized play, if your club was open, whether it was ladders or leagues or match play, showcases we had at the beginning in October, and any events that could happen at your club, in your state or in your county. And everything was to guidelines. Some states opened and they closed, and then counties came in and they closed or they opened. And so it's all quite confusing, but the clubs were managing and people are trying to play and practice as much as they can. Everything was really by skill level when it came to an accredited event, meaning it was done by the rating of the player. And we made sure that any accredited events were only hosted at facilities that had confirmed that they were complying to all of our facility standards, meaning that there was increased ventilation, filtration, the sanitization standards, etc. And then we mandated also that face masks had to be worn during accredited play, meaning that they had to be over your nose and mouth, although I understand that's been an issue or difficult to actually enforce. When it comes to the events that we have put on, the operational protocols that have been followed have limited spectators. Some have allowed one parent or one person with the player. Some have said no spectators at all. Much of that is dependent upon the state or the county or the guidelines and the gathering limits that are put forward by those authorities. Most events have only had one referee. Some have had no referees, and an adult referee has been available to referee in that event. And in every case, we've tried to make sure that there's enough time for a match to play, for that match to finish, for there to be a gap for some air exchange and safety, and then the next round goes on. So that's kind of where we are right now in terms of how we're running events. And what Harry and I did is to take a look at the data behind that, because we were talking a lot to families and to pros, and we're hearing some concerns. And so we decided to dive into the data a little bit and find out what actually was happening in the events that we've been having to date. So who is playing these events? And looking at this graph in front of you, you can see that the light blue line here, the number of ranked players in the system. And then the darker blue line are the number of players who have been participating in events in the system. And overall, about 33% of ranked players are participating in some type of accredited event. Accredited event meaning a tournament or a box league or ladder and team league as well. And what we can see really is that we're not really engaging the higher rated players. It's kind of harder to see from this graph, but mostly it's the 4-0s, 4-5s and below that are being engaged. And it's quite interesting that you can see down here that there are some players who are engaged in this that have not been rated. So we've started to introduce new players into the system based on these events, which I think is a very positive aspect of what we've been doing. When you dive a little bit further, this graph shows you the participation by the school level down here and the number of matches that have been played based upon the type of tournament by that school level. So what does that mean? Up here, we have a green line here, which is a tournament play. So we can see that most of the recorded play to date has been through tournaments, certainly up to the school level 5.5. And then you can see down here, there's quite a lot of like other types of play that's being played by these skill levels. And that kind of starts to go to tick up a little bit when it comes to the higher rated players. So the higher rated players generally not engaging in recording play, starting to go up a little bit when it comes to friendlies, when it can be controlled a little bit more, but definitely shying away from the more organized events. I think it's also important to say at this stage that we have had events in most parts of the country. So, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Maryland, DC, Virginia, Georgia, Texas, California, Ohio's had a little bit. But I think that's not everywhere in the country. And there's a big gap, I think, in the Pennsylvania area right now, and even in the New York area right now. So what we're trying to do is work with all the facilities and with the club pros to try to get on as many opportunities as we can when it comes to tournaments, and also in-house play. What I can't see on here, what you may not see on here, is the amount of school play that is happening. So the kids who are at the private high schools or the boarding schools, they tend to be playing within their own little squads, and they might be seeing some challenge ladders or some little leagues and tournaments within those players only. So the schools tend to be playing within themselves. There's a few matches that are being played between schools, but there's more organized play. So we're seeing a lot more of those ladders and leagues than we may have seen before. Okay. What I'd like to do now is just pass over to Harry, because I want to just talk a little bit about ratings. We've had ratings since October. We've had a lot of questions about ratings. Rating system is very different from a points-based system, and it's definitely brought up some concerns with families and the pros that I've been speaking to. So we wanted to just spend a few minutes to make sure everybody understood what the rating system was and what it was meant to be. And then we'll go on to talk about some of the questions that's brought up. So Harry, would you like to explain the ratings system? High level, please.
Yeah. I'm going to try to give it my best. And last time I was on one of these town hall meetings, I did drill down very much into the specifics. So I'm going to try to keep it fairly high level and speak more broadly this time. So as Kim said, in October, and as everyone on this call is most likely aware, in October, we did pivot to a ratings-based system in the interim as an option, because we have player ratings available despite reduced participation and even ability to play in many cases, which ultimately stemmed a lot of questions, concerns, frustrations with the complicated nature of the algorithm behind the rating system. So that confusion and frustration makes complete sense. Junior players over the course of their careers have been hardwired and have been conditioned for the immediate nature of a points-based system and the cause and effect nature of the points. So by that, I mean, a player plays in a tournament, they achieve X finishing position, they earn a certain number of points based on that, and those changes are immediately impacted and reflected on player profiles in an adjustment to their point average, which is then modifies or adjusts their player rankings. So the point system is very clear and it's very obvious. Ratings, on the other hand, are much more complex and subtle, which is why they were initially intended to be a longer term gauge of player ability, not a week by week adjustment of player rankings. So a couple of things that ratings are is that they are a sum of all matches that each individual player has recorded in the system within the past 45 months. So it looks at the entire universe of a player's history. Ratings are predictive and a best estimate of each player's relative ability compared to their peers based on these results. Unfortunately, ratings are not an exact science, and I hate to admit, but they never will be perfect. There are many sports out there that do try to quantify player abilities, and like I said, it's an imperfect science. As an example that makes sense to me as a golfer, is the sport of golf and the handicapping system. And you can take the same player on the same course from the same tees, playing in similar conditions, and you can see variability from that one player from upwards of 10 strokes from one day to the next. And part of the reason this happens across all sports is because human behavior, and more importantly, human performance, is completely unpredictable. So all players have slightly different player abilities from one day to another, and depends entirely on factors that are like range from sleep to stress to their general well-being, mindset, diet, fitness. And then in a sport like squash, it also add in the complicated nature of the pressure that your opponent puts on you, which is largely dependent on those same factors impacting that player as well. So while athletes obsess over trying to optimize their performance, we can't control for everything. And this variability in player ability from day to day results in matches where players both outperform and underperform their ability on any given day. Therefore, through a series of weights and for each match result, the rating algorithm is able to make sense of this fluctuation in player ability from day to day. And by doing so, the algorithm is effectively telling players the direction that their rating is trending, which is based on all the matches that they've played to date. So one match result where a player either outperforms or underperforms his or her rating doesn't really significantly impact their rating because it's not a trend, it's one match. No trend has been established in this case. However, over the course of multiple results that are moving in the same direction, the algorithm is able to establish a trend of this player, and therefore their player rating is going to be moving upwards or downward. So from the standpoint of ratings, match results can't be viewed or interpreted in isolation, which is the immediate nature of and the way junior players have been hardwired with the points-based system. I got X points, and this is how my point average has changed as a result of that. With ratings, you need to look at the overall trend of the sum of all results that have been played to date. And that's one of the reasons it's so difficult to interpret the ratings, and then also to look at individual match results and expect specific changes based on one result. It is the universe of all results that are played for each player.
Thank you, Harry. So as you can see, it's quite complicated. And so what we have seen, I think, is people are asking themselves what they should do. So we have some of these events out there, and the question you're asking yourselves is, should I enter them or should I not? And if you're thinking about why the advantages and disadvantages of either of those options, are people who are looking to compete, like the advantages of competing. So as Harry said, rating is an average of all of your results the last 45 months. So the more results you have, the more stable and perhaps the more accurate your rating will be. Also means that if you have a bad day, if you underperform on a bad day, it's fine. Your rating is going to be quite stable. If you have a really fantastic result, though, it's going to have the same effect. It maybe change a little bit, but it's not going to be significant. It's a trend that it's looking for. You know, if I beat Harry one day, then it's clearly an aberration, and that should never have happened. And so, why should my rating improve? But if I continue to beat him, then yeah, maybe it should. So if you're wanting to compete, and if you are competing, the advantages are that your rating is stable. It's not going to change significantly one way or the other based upon a good or bad result. But if you continue to do well, you will be rewarded. But then again, some people don't want to compete. When I say compete, I really mean I record a result on Club Locker because that's when the ratings exchange happens. So if you choose to not compete, because a lot of people can see that, well, your rating is still high. The rating doesn't drop off because it's for 45 months. So if you've played over the last 45 months, the rating's going to stay. And if someone that you're playing continues to play, so like I've played Harry and Harry's continuing to play, my rating will stay and go along with him. So if I can see my rating stay high, then why would I risk it by playing, maybe? So those are some of the questions that are being asked on the advantages of either of those options. But then again, what happens if I choose to not record results? If I don't record results, so the disadvantages are that there's this perceived lack of reward for winning or playing. So if I did have that great result with Harry, so what? You know, I have to do it again. I have to back it up. Whereas the point system, if I got that good result against Harry, that'd be fantastic. I'd get to the next round of the tournament and my points would go up significantly, and maybe my ranking would too. So, so why would I compete in that case if I'm not going to get rewarded for it? Well, you know, what's the point? But if you play a lot, you will trend upwards. There are players whose rating has improved significantly through these events. If I decide to not compete and not record results because my rating stays high, and I'm just riding on Harry's coattails as he does really well. So what are the disadvantages of doing that? What that really means is that the system or the rating, we say, becomes more volatile, meaning that it's more prone to change the next time that you play. And the longer that you leave it until you record a result, the more chance you have that your rating could change more significantly, because the system won't know. You know, if I carry on, Harry plays and plays for the next year and I don't. In fact, and that's kind of happened to me. My rating, I haven't played for like 2 years and my rating stayed at whatever it stayed at. I'm probably not that level of player anymore. But the system doesn't know that until I record the next result. And after I do that, then my rating will change. So, you know, it's in England, we'd say it swings and roundabouts. I don't know if that translates in America, but there's enough English people there who might understand. There are pushes and pulls and balances on both sides, and people have to decide what they think is best for them. But I did think it was important that everybody understood what the questions were and what the answers were for you to record results or not. Because I think that, and what I feel is that this is something that all of you are wrestling with right now. So moving on from that, I do think that we've had, it's been very interesting to watch how the participation has happened, I say, since October, and who has been engaged and what the results of that have been. And I think that we can definitely say that for the lower level players and for the new players, the ratings events have worked really well. And there's a lot of people that are improving and are truly engaged and trying to improve themselves. And you can easily see that from the rating trends. The ratings are actually a good indicator of playing level. And I know there's some concern about playing between groups. So a boys' rating is the same as girls' ratings, the same as adult ratings. Is a 3.5 really a 3.5? We looked at the analysis and we looked at the matches that have been recorded and looking at the results of the tournaments that are happening right now. And for the people that are participating, there is definitely consistency between those groups. girls are winning just as many tournaments as boys are. And so if you're participating, I can definitely say, and the data backs it up, that these groups' ratings are the same. If there isn't any crossover in a group, then maybe it would need that crossover to calibrate between the groups. But at the moment, for those who are playing, it's consistent. What I have liked to see is the more kind of recreational play, the more organized play that's happening, the more that the clubs are doing their in-house clubs, leagues and ladders. There's been some great little interstate or within the state team leagues. And I think that this is a really positive thing that's happened, an aspect of the pandemic and what we're seeing, in that there is some reason to play outside of the competitive junior squash. And that I think for us to look at that and see how we can create not just a competitive system, but have more options outside of that. I can definitely see that that's an improvement over the last 6 months, and there are more options for us as we move into the next phase, I guess, of our growth and development, and to have more options for the junior player. And we'll go into that a little bit more on the next slide. But I think ultimately, I think all of us will agree that the junior ranking system, it does need to be transparent. People do need to know why a ranking is a ranking, or they've moved up or they've moved down. And it's very hard to do with a rating system. So I do believe that we want to move and we want to have a junior ranking system that is transparent and also rewards those players that are active. So the rating system is great. It does show the right playing level, a good playing level between players. But I think for our ranking system, a national system, we want it to be transparent and to reward those who play in it. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is how we go back to that. And in the end, I think we will have two systems. We will have the rating and we will have points, and there's a place for both of them. So just to reiterate what I said about the universe of junior squash, as I say, the before pandemic, about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, this is our system. We've got our JCTs, gold, silver, bronzes, our Team USA, and very much concentrated a lot of our junior squash on this system and getting people into it. This was their onboarding to play in a bronze tournament. And what we're seeing now is that maybe we should look beyond that, and we should use the learnings we have from the rating system and create more junior leagues, create more perhaps district tournaments and more skill level tournaments. I think it'll be more inclusive in that you don't have to travel across the country to get some enjoyment from squash. And how do we do that? And how do we help people with those opportunities? And at the same time, I think we need to really look at the entry level. So let's see, get to my right side here. So if you look at the entry level, at the moment it's quite a tough start. You go straight into a bronze tournament. It's quite intense, environment. If that's your first introduction to junior squash, that can be quite intimidating. And so that I think it's worthwhile for us to put some effort into educating new players in how or what to expect from junior squash. Meaning, let's teach them, like, what does match play mean? What kind of sportsmanship and etiquette do we expect of these tournaments? And can we reinforce that at a club level before you go into a national tournament? Let's teach the kids how to do rules and refereeing in their club, in the safety of their own club with their own pro. And so they can make the mistakes there and they can learn from it. They can learn from that so that when they go to a national system, they're more ready and prepared. They're not going to be perfect, they're kids, but we can prepare them a little bit better for what they're going to expect. We want to make sure that the activities, they are age appropriate, whether a 5-year-old is going to be different from a 15-year-old, and make sure that it's the whole athlete we're looking at, not necessarily just squash specific. Let's look at that injury prevention as well. We should be introducing them at the club level to US Squash and to Club Locker, so they know what to look for their profile or how to run a tournament. So, and then lastly, let's let them understand what to expect for tournament play. So we can get these kids more educated and learning at their club level in that safe environment, as I said, and then we can help them then move into the competitive system when they're ready. Some people may be ready straight away. They want to go straight into this competitive system. Some might want to go over here and just play a little bit more locally. They don't want to travel. Maybe they can't afford to travel. Let's give them more options here. And maybe when they're a bit older, maybe they've improved. They're like, I think I'd like to try and get, be in the competitive system now. And so we'll provide pathways for them to jump into that system when they're ready. So this is where we're going. We're not there now, but I thought you'd want to know and deserve to know where we were going with junior squash. But the rest of this presentation is all about how do we restart this engine. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about the transition process. Harry's going to describe a few new terms that we're going to use during that process. And then we'll talk about the phases and the phased approach. So Harry, would you like to explain new terms?
Yeah, so as Ken mentioned, these are just a few terms that we're going to be using over the next 3, 4, 5 slides as we go through the 3 different phases of the transition process back to a full reboot of the tournament points earning gold, silver, bronze junior system again. So starting up at the top, we have the rating confidence interval, which is just a measurement based on participation, which is through recorded matches in the system. The banked tournament points will be a time period where players, effectively the tournaments are back on the calendar, they're distributed regionally, there's opportunity at each level within each region, and players participate in tournaments, earn points, and those points are reflected on player profiles, are not yet at that moment translated into a ranking, but will be at some point in the future. And then the last phrase is with the phantom points. So the phantom points are points, phantom points are tournament points that will automatically be assigned to all players to establish a starting ranking, basically. And how are these points determined? There are 2 main factors. One is just a simple conversion from ratings to points to determine the maximum points that would be available to each player based on their rating. And then a secondary factor, which is the rating confidence index, which will determine the percentage of those points which are available to players. And we'll provide more details on those as we talk through the next few slides, but just wanted to address those head on so that everyone was aware of the terms that we're referring to over the next couple slides.
Okay, thanks, Harry. So the transition process that we're proposing, an overview of the 3 phases, the 3-phase approach. The first phase is to prepare for play. So this is like us saying the clock starts now, so be ready in 6 weeks' time. We're going to start playing more serious squash for points. So to prepare for play, we would expect you to be getting yourself match fit. We obviously don't want you to get injured. Some of you may have not played for, some of you can play, some of you can't. So we need to give you time to be able to get in your head in the space again and to be fit and not be injured. So that's a prepare for play stage, similar to what we have now, and we'll talk about the detail of that in a second. We will then go to a phase called playing for ranking points. This is a phase where we will put on tournaments. We will schedule tournaments around the country of different levels. You'll play in those tournaments and you will earn ranking points. We'll probably have that phase for 2 to 3 months, and then we'll be able to start the ranking point system. So you will have accumulated your points, you will be able to have a points average, and then the point system starts. If you are uncomfortable playing, you're not ready to play, as Harry said, we have a phantom point system, so that nobody who is currently ranked will start from 0. We'll all start from a position that's reflective of your rating. In terms of operational protocols, I just want to talk very quickly about that. I do see that for all of these phases, our COVID protocols will stay in place unless something significant happens, and we'll obviously continue to monitor guidelines to see what's being recommended. But I suspect and think that we will still be limiting spectators into tournaments to probably 1, possibly none, but probably 1. And I think that we may well still want to have just 1 referee. I think all of our host facilities will still need to meet the standards that we've set for facilities for accredited play. And for now, based upon what we know today, I think that we will still be requiring face masks on court. Some of you may wonder about the role of testing in vaccinations, and that is something that we're continuing to monitor. I don't think, knowing what we know today, that we would drop the face mask requirement, but there's a lot of time between now and say April and May, and things can change very quickly. So we will continue to monitor what the authorities are recommending in that regard. We'll continue to ask our medical advisory committee on what their recommendations would be. But for now, those protocols, I think, would stay in place until we see some other authorities recommending that we can drop them. So Harry, tell us a little bit more about how we can get from where we are now to our point system starting again.
Yeah. So the first phase is, as you can see, is called prepare for play. So it is effectively what we're doing today, but it's going to be a formal 6-week notice about the resumption of tournament play. And as Kim just said a second ago, this is really an indication for players and a notice that tournament play is starting in the near future, and that it's recommended to use the time period to work on fitness and match readiness with a focus on health and safety and injury prevention, just to make sure your bodies are ready to get back into the competitive environment of a squash competition. So as of now, we are anticipating and hoping to begin this prepare for play period during the week of April 12th. And this 6-week period would be marked by regional and local competition in the form of our standard organized play structures, which are currently operating around the country. During this period, rankings are still based off of player ratings. Qualification into tournaments is first come, first served. Seeding is based on player rating. And then at the beginning of this, during this period, US Squash would be also releasing a tool which would be allowing players to calculate their projected phantom points, which again is based off of the conversion of player rating to points, and then using the RCI, the confidence index score, to determine how many points are available to that player. So again, the RCI is a measurement based on participation, which will be used to classify the confidence in the accuracy of each player's rating based on the results that have been entered in the system. And it's just going to be a fairly simple high, medium, low scale for the RCI. And plain and simple, the more results that are entered into the system, the more accurate the rating will be believed to be, and therefore the higher number of points that will be unlocked for each player. So in order to maximize the quote unquote phantom points that are available to each player, players should aim to improve their RCI score. And in order to improve their RCI score, you need to record more results through the Club Locker system. And we'll be releasing specific guidance on that with this tool that we'll be releasing in this prepare to play period, which would then allow players time to make judgment calls on what is best and how best to maximize the phantom points that would be assigned to them during this time period, or at the end of this time period, sorry. And next slide, please, Ken. So at the conclusion of that 6-week prepare for play period, we're going to be in this play for ranking points section or phase of the reboot. And this is effectively where the banking points period that we referred to on the term slide takes place. So this is really when tournaments are back in a format that we're all familiar with. Rankings are still based on player rating at this time. Qualification into tournaments, so the cut lists and wait lists would be determined by player rating at this point. Seeding is based on rating. An adjustment during this time period is that tournaments will be going back to the age divisions. So the U11s through the U19s on the boys and the girls side, rather than the co-ed divisions that we're currently operating on the skill level basis. And we are hoping to be able to start this play for ranking points period during the weekend of May 29th. At the beginning of this period, US Squash will be assigning these phantom tournament points that I've referred to a number of times to player profiles, which then gives them the ability to see exactly how many points that they will be given for this restart process, and therefore they're able to make decisions about participation in tournaments. So a couple of high-level rules that are associated with the phantom points is each player would be assigned 4 tournaments of the same value because the minimum, in order to receive a full ranking, it's an average of your top 4 tournaments. Points that are earned through participation in tournaments would take priority over any phantom points that are assigned to player profiles. So what that means is if a player, let's say, plays in 2 tournaments over the course of this play for points period, that means those 2 tournaments would automatically count. And then the remaining 2 phantom tournaments that are on the player's profile would round out their 4 tournaments. Points would be assigned, the phantom points would be assigned based on a player's division of play. They wouldn't be able to basically declare a specific division that they want them to be assigned to. They'll just go into the division, which is indicative of their age, or is based off of their age. And if they choose to play up in different divisions, this our standard age conversion calculation would take place then. The points, these phantom points would drop off more rapidly than standard tournament points. These aren't points that are intended to stay on players' profiles and determine their ranking for an 11-month period, like all other tournaments are. And the expectation and the plan is to have all phantom point tournaments have dropped off of players and become inactive and not impacting ranking prior to the qualification deadline for the junior nationals next year. So that means the 4th tournament will have dropped off in February prior to that last, I guess it depends on when the actual tournament is scheduled for, but historically that deadline is very late February, early March. So all of those phantom tournaments will have become inactive at that point, and therefore every single person who qualifies into the nationals qualifies based on current participation rather than points that have been converted from rating and have been adjusted based off of the rating confidence interval. And then I think that brings us to our final period. Kim, if you change the slide, which is just the ranking point system. Full restart during this period. We go back to the junior national rankings by age group. So boys 11 through 19, girls 11 through 19. The rankings are based off of the point averages. Again, the phantom points are there as an option for players who are either unable or unwilling to participate during this period in junior tournaments, or just decide to take the summer off, as it is traditionally in off season. And qualification for tournaments during this period will go back into a points-based cutlass point seeding point system. The seeding will be based off of seeding points. The divisions will be based off of age group divisions. Again, players will be earning ranking points again, and then we're back into this. We've effectively fully restarted the points-based system at this point. And we are targeting early September to hopefully be able to be back into the full swing of a full rankings point system. We do see a lot of benefits to this system. Most notably is the fact that we kind of view this as a no player left behind situation or policy or plan. We understand that everyone has different tolerances for their risk assessments in terms of their either their individual circumstance or their willingness to play squash at the moment. And although the case rates seem to be on the decline and news is becoming more positive, we completely understand that. So by assigning these phantom points and giving players a starting point, regardless of their participation, we think is a good policy and does give players the ability and alleviates a little bit of the pressure that they may be feeling to jump back in before they're actually comfortable. And the other major benefit of this policy and plan is that it does incentivize participation over the course of the summer. So players will see how many points by virtue of these phantom points that appear on their profiles and through the tools that we'll be providing before that date. They'll see exactly how many points, and then they make their own assessment of, will I be able to earn more points by playing in tournaments over the summer than the points that I have been given through this phantom point system. So we really do see a lot of positives. We've talked with a lot of different groups on this, and it seems to be a lot of support for it and a lot of agreement about the need to protect players and not require them to start at zero if they miss this window of playing in the initial play for points period. So do you have anything to add on that, Kim?
No, I think that was very well said. What I'd also like to add is that we shouldn't forget the experience of last season. It seems such a long time ago, but there, we introduced a bunch of changes, and there were some concerns and some learnings from that as well that we need to make sure that we address when we go back to a points-based system. So when we do get to September, say, and hopefully it's September, and we start our point system, we need to make sure we've considered these issues. So we need to make sure that we are providing mobility. And there's a perception that it wasn't what it should have been. And so we need to look at that and make sure that we are allowing people to move up and that people will also move down. So that needs some definite looking at, and that will also affect the schedule of events across the country at different levels. There was also concerns about players playing up 2 divisions, and should we be allowing it? Is it okay for development, or is it okay for practice? And so we need to just investigate what we want to do with playing up 2 divisions and how we want to approach that. We get more and more international players coming to our boarding schools and wanting to play in the junior system, and they're talented players. Do they have to start at the bottom, or should they be able to jump in somewhere so it's more appropriate to their playing level? We did see a lot of concurrent entries into tournaments. So because of the waitlist situation, some people were entering 2 tournaments and then waiting to the last minute to withdraw from one, which leads into the next issue, which was a late withdrawal deadline on a Monday, when people would suddenly drop out of a tournament, and people who were on the waitlist didn't have enough time to perhaps take up a spot. So we need to look at that whole process and timelines. And also, lot of people giving us doctor's notes, and it seems like doctor's notes are very easy to come by. And so we need to just make sure that that the injury management, if you withdraw because of an injury, that we manage that in the right way. If people are really injured, obviously we want them not to play, but at the same time, if you can just get a doctor's note by signing some piece of paper, then that's not really doing what we want it to do either. So quite a few issues there that we need to work through between now and September. But we have some time, and we just wanted to make sure that you knew that we hadn't forgotten about those learnings and that we would incorporate those into the system that we go back to. So we have finally come to an end. It's unfortunately about 8:45. We can go on as long as you want, but does anyone have any questions then that you can pass our way, and we'll try to explain what perhaps we didn't explain very well before.
Sure. And as we lead into the Q&A and take questions to people, one, I want to thank people for submitting questions. We know the last thing any of you probably need in your lives right now are more Zoom meetings. So, you know, the fact that we have more people on this meeting than we have at any forum since the beginning of the pandemic, and we started doing this by a long shot, pushing 200 at some point, is really energizing for us to have this level of engagement. So thank you to everyone. It's exciting to have this as we start to arc back towards more full competition and getting more of you out on court. So thank you again. I think a good place to start would be, Harry, I'll pass this one to you. We've had a couple questions around Scholar Athlete this year and how that program is going to look, whether those awards will still be given out, and whether there will be any differences because of the lack of kind of large scale play that's happened over the last several months here.
Yeah, definitely. So earlier in January, US Squash did announce that we will be moving forward with the Scholar Athlete Award for this current season. And we did make a few modifications to the participation criteria. So the academic component is still roughly the same, with some of the same modifications that we had last year, which is just basically in the event that your school is doing remote learning and there's adjustments to their traditional transcripts, we can work with schools and the applicants on a case-by-case basis to determine the eligibility from a GPA standpoint. But more importantly, or I'm sure more the focus of many on the call is the participation criteria for the award. And for the current season, the current standard is, or expectation is 12 accredited matches played between August 1st of 2020 and July 31st of 2021. So this coming summer. So we understand that the snap judgment to that might be that's a lot of matches to play. There have been a lot of matches played to date, and our hope and expectation, and I think numbers at the moment, case numbers at the moment, indicate that the COVID situation is on it's beginning to improve and will continue to get better, and we'll find more efficiencies in the vaccination processes. We have rolled out or expanded the matches that are factored into this calculation or to this count, from simply tournament play and school league matches to any accredited match play that is entered through the club locker, through an organized play club locker system. So what that means is box leagues, challenge ladders, team leagues, tournaments, and other round robin type events, which are played from the local club level to internally on a scholastic team to any of the tournaments that you would be participating in around the country, and expanding the deadline for that participation 3 months through the end of July.
Thanks, Harry. Next one, wanted to address, and this has come from a couple people, and I appreciate Stacy for triggering the initial question on this. there are some concerns about kind of the amount of play in different areas relative to others. And there's obviously been a lot of kind of complicating multiple factors going into that right now. Kim, would you mind talking a little bit about kind of the efforts to encourage and facilitate different types of competition based on kind of state-by-state guidelines and what we're doing to try and make sure there's as much competition available as possible?
Yes, as everybody on the call knows, states have been going in and out of degree of openness, if that's a word, of clubs and the ability to play and what type of play is allowed. And so there has been some activity in some states and then it stopped, and then, you know, maybe there are in other states and it's continued. And so it can be a little disconcerting if you're in a state that is not allowing play at the moment to be looking across and seeing somewhere else that is, and you're obviously going to feel like that's not fair or that you're at a disadvantage. What we are trying to do is every facility around the country and all the, you know, and the teaching pros and US Squash are on calls all the time to try to help each other with different types of play that are allowed. So we're definitely proactively reaching out to the different pros in the different states to try to get them to do as much as they can according to the guidelines in their area. What we have found is that, you know, somewhere like New York, for instance, New York allows tournaments. New York allows competitive play, but sometimes the clubs, they don't want to open up that much. They're a little bit more cautious because maybe they have perhaps some older people, some members who they want to be cognizant of. They don't necessarily want a bunch of children and junior players around all of their membership. And so they're having a slightly more cautious approach to opening, which means that the play in the squash facility is more limited than it could be. So we're just trying to work through all of those things with the clubs to find out what it is that they can do and help them with that. And we are seeing more and more organized play. So even if it's not a tournament, we're seeing more and more box leagues, ladders, friendlies, and just kind of match play sessions come up now that we didn't see before. So we are proactively going through that list and going through, you know, this state can open, therefore let's go to all those pros and let's see what they can do within the limits of their membership and their club are telling them. A state like, I think I saw something about Pennsylvania. You know, Pennsylvania is not allowing competition right now. We can't do any tournaments in Pennsylvania at the moment. But they can do in individual clubs. You can do some box leagues and ladders in your club. So it's like, let's not just think about tournament play as a means to an end of recording matches. There are other ways to find competition at the moment. And so it's looking more local to see what you can do within your own environment. But know that we are actively working with the pros to do as much as we can within the limitations of their facility and their state. And then our hope is that as we see the positivity rates go down, that the states will start to open up a little bit more and allow a little bit more inter-club play and then maybe regional play, and et cetera, and so on. So we're looking to see those triggers. We're looking to see travel restrictions being lifted without quarantining, but we are working very closely together to try to give as much opportunity as we can. And then it's a question of taking that opportunity, right? So if there is an opportunity in your state or in a state that you are allowed to travel to, then please try and take that opportunity if you can. So there are quite a few states, as I said at the beginning, that do have some events right now if you're comfortable competing in them. I don't know if that was, I think that answered the question and maybe more. I think I rambled on, sorry.
No problem at all. And I will note, we've got about 2 minutes left in the expected session. I think we'll extend this to 9:15, so the opportunity to address a few more of these questions. And then obviously we'll have a lot more to answer as this process goes, and look forward to kind of actively communicating over the coming weeks and months here, giving more details and answering more questions that come from the community itself. Kim, I've got another question for you, and I think just can address this relatively briefly. We've got some questions around national team selection, both for Worlds and then for lower level competitions. Can you just let people know what our plans are and kind of future communications coming up about how we'll handle selection and so on?
Yeah, I've spoken to a few families who are concerned about the national team selection process because it's still possible that there'll be a World Juniors this year in Egypt, and I know that everyone would like their players to have the opportunity to play for Team USA. And so we are talking right now about the different options for qualification. We have 2 or 3 options that are open to us that we're working through, and then we plan to be communicating to you guys in the next few weeks on what exactly that will look like, so that you know what you need to do to be able to have your kid have a chance at qualifying for Team USA. So please look out for more communication from us on that. We're just finalizing the options right now, and then we'll be in touch.
And along the kind of higher end play, Kim, we've got a couple questions around when we would expect JCT level and kind of national level tournaments to first start coming on the calendar, if we have information on that. And some of those questions also circled around the difficulties for some of the highest rated players to be willing or interested in participating in tournaments or box leagues, ladders, and so on. Can you address that more broadly?
So as Harry described, the phase 2 of our transition process is playing for ranking points. Proposed starting date is Memorial Weekend through to Labor Day. I would expect to have some high-level tournaments during that period for national players, for the highest ranked players. We haven't yet worked the detail of the schedule of those tournaments during that period out, but we will provide opportunities regionally for almost every player, and enough opportunities as well. Try and make those tournaments as inclusive as possible, so that everyone can have a chance to play to get the points that they believe that they deserve and they should have. So I do think there will be some national, I say national level, and I guess that means the top ranked players. There will be some during the summer. I can't tell you exactly when, but that's kind of where we're going. I don't necessarily see the summer being bronze, silver, gold, JCT. I think they will be 2 or 3 different levels of tournament, much more inclusive and as big as we can make them. And I would also see some tournaments being over, or divisions split over 2 weekends, because we are going to have to take longer for each tournament and for each round, and that will either mean more courts, or it will mean reduced division size, or it will mean split the divisions so we can keep the division sizes as high as possible. So I would say the summer, but obviously we're looking for travel restrictions to be lifted. There was another question in there. I can't remember what you said.
No, I think it addressed part of it. I think there are ongoing questions that you addressed a little bit earlier around kind of different levels and players engaging in types of play. And I think you addressed, specifically early in the call, the fact that we're seeing the highest rated players not participating in as many tournaments and so on. So I think we've addressed pieces of it. I do think more information forthcoming from us on how to make sure we're engaging players across every level will be coming from us. And a lot of what I know you guys are doing is building programs in a way to try and make sure that we're as broadly inclusive across those levels as possible.
Right. I would just like to say that every event that is out there offers a high rated skill level division. So there have been opportunities that are out there for higher rated players to compete if they wanted to, and available across several states. Now I understand completely why, the dilemma that people are in and whether to compete or not. And so I would say to some of the higher rated players, like if you are in an area that, that crosses states, that has events, then there could be an opportunity there for you to be able to compete against players of a similar ability. But there are players who don't have that luxury, the people who are in a smaller, perhaps emerging area, and it's more difficult for you to find people or players of the similar rating. But don't limit yourself to the same age and gender. Like, a rating is a rating. So if you're a 5.0 player, seek out other 5.0 players in your area if you can, and that would be another way of perhaps getting some like skilled level play. But I understand it's not easy and not everyone can do that. But as I said, we do expect the country to start opening up and for there to be more opportunities in the next few months, and certainly before May, for every player to be able to get some kind of competitive play recorded if they choose to do so. But again, I don't think that everybody is ready. I don't think everybody should feel compelled to play, like Harry said. There's still a pandemic going on, and I think the phantom points, as Harry said, means that people can feel comfortable that it's okay for them to not play. They're not going to be overly penalized for not playing. I mean, it's a pandemic, and so you will have points which will enable you to get started into this in the system at a place that will allow you to get to where you think you need to be. So I do like the phantom points system. I think it gives a great baseline for players and allows people to jump in when they are ready, and that's important at this stage, I think.
I think that's a good follow-on to one of the next questions, and I'll send this to you, Harry. We've had several people ask for some more details around the RCI, which I think is worth redefining. But we've also had some questions which I think can be addressed in the same time of, I'll read one directly saying, right now we are seeing some players not playing tournaments and seeing their rating and hence rating, especially top rated players, seeing their rating and hence ranking improve without playing even in the areas that they are. Does the system address that issue? So I think speaking a little bit to the RCI and how relative play is encouraged, even if it's not required, would be helpful here.
Yeah, so again, the phantom points, I'm going to start there, so I apologize. That will be assigned to player profiles starts with a conversion from a player's rating to a point value. And that amount is the maximum number of phantom points that would be available to any given player. The secondary filter that will be used is the RCI, which is a confidence index which is basically a quantification, a quantified accuracy score for the rating. So obviously player ratings, the more matches that are recorded through the system, the more data points the algorithm has, the higher the level of accuracy is for that player's rating. So if a player is highly rated and hasn't played in a match or hasn't recorded a match in the system, I'll say, in the past 12 months, then their RCI would be low. The scale that we would be using is fairly simple. It's just low, medium, high. And there would be thresholds to go from low to medium, medium to high, which we will communicate with the community. But so if someone has played in 0 matches or recorded 0 matches in the system over the past 12 months, they would have a low RCI. And again, just ballparking here, so don't quote me on this, but that would effectively bring the points. So let's say they had, based on their rating, they had 1,000 points available to them. If they have a low RCI, then they are only eligible for 70% of that, so 700 points. So therefore, if you have 2 players that are the exact same rating, one player is playing relatively regularly or like as allowed, and has a high RCI, and the other player who has not played or recorded a single match in the system in 12 months, it would be a high RCI versus a low RCI. And although those 2 players have the exact same rating, one would have 1,000 points and the other would have 700 points as a start. Again, all ballparked figures right there, but I think that is just to more clearly delineate that process and how those points would be determined.
Thanks, Harry. Kim, I'm going to go back to you. We've got a couple questions about, through this time, we've had a lot of competitions where we're having cross-gender competitions, girls playing boys and vice versa, different age groups mixing together and so on. And we've had questions that have kind of come from a couple angles there. One indicating that ratings tend to, even though they do cross over between age groups, that they don't always equate, that the high rating in one age group may not equal another. But more holistically, I think it'd be helpful if you provide a little context on, in these 3 phases, how we're kind of transitioning from the more mixed play to more age division and or gender specific play. While also, I know you mentioned earlier a few opportunities where some of that would be preserved in a limited aspect. Can you just kind of provide that high level overview again of what the next few months will look like for that crossover play.
Yes, so as Dan says, let's start with where we are today, with where we have the crossover play. It is done by your rating. And I just want to reiterate what I said before. When we look at the data that we have, the only data we have is what's been recorded, the rating is a rating, and it doesn't matter what age you are, what gender you are. A 3.5 is a 3.5. And we do see as many girls winning divisions in tournaments as we see boys, and we see young girls, beating older kids as well. So it does seem to be that rating is pretty consistent when people are participating. But I do understand that there's definitely a perception that the ratings are not equal between the different groups of players, and it does depend, and the accuracy does depend upon the calibration or matches between those two different groups. So I think that on balance, the rating does represent the same skill level, but it can represent a different style of play. And I know there's some concern, because if you do have a small girl, 10-year-old girl playing a 16-year-old boy, those styles of play are very different. And the 16-year-old boy, he could still be a 3.5, and the 10-year-old girl could still be a 3.5. But the 16-year-old probably more physical, and the 10-year-old is probably more technical. And that I can see that some people may be uncomfortable with that matchup. That's where we are today. When we are doing the prepare for play phase, we will continue to have the co-ed divisions. It is actually, it is really up to the tournament directors. We don't mind, we can have age group divisions at that time. It's just what the purpose of the tournament is. And so because at the prepare for play stage, we're still doing ratings exchange. There are no points involved. If you're looking for competitive play, it's better to stay with the skill level. When we're talking about points, then we need to transition to age groups. Part of the reason we're at the ratings play in the co-ed groups is because generally the tournaments are localized and smaller, and so you're taking a smaller player base. And so you may have, say, 5 under 15 girls, but one might be really like a 5.0 player, and one might just have a ranking or rating. And so you have such a vast discrepancy in playing level that it doesn't make sense to have an under 15 age group. Whereas it could make sense to have a 15-year-old girl playing with a 17-year-old boy and an adult. So that is where the ratings comes into its own. But suddenly when we go to the playing for point stage, and when you're playing in your finishing position then allocates you points, and that is when we need to transition back to an age division. And that is when we really want to try to get slightly bigger tournaments to make sure that those are meaningful play as well. But we're definitely looking at the structure of that. But at that stage, so effectively from Memorial Day, we're back to age division play for ranking points. I think that answered the question.
Thanks, Kim. I think we'll take one or two more here. Harry, we had a couple questions after some of your initial explanation around summer points and whether there's banking of those points, whether the banking of those summer points earned is optional, and also whether the number of exposure divisors will remain the same. Would you mind touching on that, please?
Yeah. So the assignment of phantom points is not optional. Right at the beginning of this play for points period, these phantom points will appear on player profiles. And then I think the question is, if a player chooses to participate in tournaments over this play for points period, whether or not they can opt out of those points, I believe is what they're getting at. And the short answer is no. The tournaments that are played in would effectively replace one of the 4 phantom point tournaments. So it would be similar to like when a player ages up from one age group to the next. If you don't have any active exposures in that older age group, you have 4 converted tournaments, and every single time you play in a tournament in that new age group, that takes priority over the converted points. So this is similar, where the phantom points are projected points, and we want to get to a place where all points that inform the rankings are based on actual tournament results and tournament performance from within the past X number, from as short of a time period as possible, basically.
Got it. Thanks, Harry. I think in our final minute here, Kim, I'd like to just allow you to kind of close in any holistic way. I think a lot of people's, questions, we're in this kind of transition point where people are mixing equal parts excitement, anxiety, take your pick of emotions, which as most of us are in life these days. And obviously these questions and decisions really matter for people and for families. So I think there are many questions, outstanding that we're not going to be able to get to everything tonight. I want to assure people we are banking a lot of these questions, and we'll look in our communications to continue to address these and continue to hold forums in the future. I do think that questions about fairness of the ratings, how those are interplaying with the tournament points, the phantom points, the RCI, and so on as we transition back. There are a lot of details to continue to work through to make sure it's as fair and equitable a system, both geographically, between ages, genders, and so on as possible. So we'll continue to work through that. We encourage everyone to continue to send their feedback and questions directly to us. But Kim, I wanted to give you the opportunity in closing here to provide any other kind of high level kind of context or closing thoughts from your end as the head of this process.
No, I think this is the first time that everyone on this call, apart from Harry and Dan, will have heard what we had to say. And I think that there's a lot to take in and a lot to understand. Obviously, Harry and I have been through it many times, and so we may have missed some of the explanation just because we're so close to it. So what we will do after this session is send around the presentation and the recording and give you time to think about what we have said and think about what, the questions that you have. And then we definitely want you to contact us if you have any concerns and questions, and we'll help you try to understand what those answers are. So I think it's time for you to think about it, to look at the information. We believe it's a good system to transition back to a point system. We believe it's as fair as we can make it. And I can assure you that the tournaments that we have over the summer will be as fairly scheduled and placed in the country as they can possibly be, to give those who want to participate the opportunity to do so. So we hope that when you've thought about it, when you think about what it means for you, that you'll agree that it's a fair and balanced way to go back to a point system. And that we really also hope, and I'm sure I speak for everyone here, that we can meet these timelines, give the junior players who I know have all been practicing. I know anecdotally they're all on court and they're all just waiting for the chance to start to really compete again. So I hope that what we said tonight gives them the clarity and the purpose and the hope that this is going to start again. But please contact us if you've got any questions and concerns. We're always here to help you and to help answer your questions.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Kim and Harry. I want to thank you as well for helping to lead the session. I want to thank, as I said before, all of you for donating time, either from right after work on the West Coast or later at night on the East Coast, and everyone in between. So we're really grateful to have all of you here. We did do a transition from ratings-based rankings to points about 10 years ago for the first time in the junior system. I think many of your families were not involved at that time. And as someone who was involved in that, I can happily say that it's we've learned a lot. And Kim, you're putting us a little bit. Kim and Harry are putting us a little bit to shame from what we did 10 years ago. So again, thank you both, and thank you to our entire community. And we can't wait to see all of you back on court in the coming months. And we hope everyone stays safe, and healthy, and has a good night.